So I am so pleased to welcome Art Blevins to the show. I've met Art a few times, all on retreat, and was just incredibly moved by his poetry and his reading of his own poetry to the group. So I invited him to chat with us. He actually wears several hats. He's also a musician, and he works with people with addiction. And he does that through music and music mindfulness. But we're going to let him explain all that. Anyway, first, I just want to introduce Art Blevins.
Hello, Angelo. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. I've been looking forward to this, and yeah, just it's just gonna be a blast. I'm sure. I already know.
Oh,
So, so maybe just give us a little bit of background on yourself, whatever you feel is relevant to let people know about yourself. Where'd you come from, and what kind of
sure,
interests you have, that sort of thing.
sure. Um, I've been creative all my life, mostly with music. Um, Although that's not what I did as a profession. That was always a side thing, but very heavily involved in that. I retired early from a career in the tech industry, and now I work just a handful of hours each week, as you mentioned, doing music wellness stuff at a local addiction treatment facility, and also with a charity organization in town that does hospice work.
Mm.
So mostly I have a lot of free time now, which I
Mm.
love. So I
Yeah.
spend actually a lot of my day doing music, poetry, visual arts. It's well, a lot more fun and interesting than the tech industry, for sure.
Mm.
That initial shift of awakening happened quite out of the blue about 6 years ago. And looking back, I can actually see how the creativity in my life played a vital role in that. And it's been very interesting to observe the evolution of the creativity since then. So,
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear about that. Can you give us a little bit of a background into maybe how that sort of started to come about, or when you noticed something shifting, and how the creativity played into that?
sure. Um, well, well, let me see. The way that happened is uh, I, uh, I mentioned that I retired early. As since I was a musician, I was not a stranger to having a few drinks when I was out playing at the clubs and stuff. And 3 months after I retired, that drink had gotten a little too heavy. And I realized I was physically addicted to alcohol. So it's a strange way to start the awakening and the creativity stuff, but it will become clear here in a second. I was about a week into rehab, and one of the therapists recommended that I read Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now. Mm. The day after I started that book, they announced that we were going on a recreational outing to do zip lining. Everybody else at the rehab thought that was wonderful. I went into panic mode because at the time I had a fear of heights. Now, shadow work since then has revealed what that was all about, and I no longer have that. But at that time, on that day, I was in panic mode. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to pills or alcohol to calm my anxieties anymore. So the only thing I had was that book of Eckhart Tolle's. I was only about 30 or 40 pages in, but he had mentioned, if you're dealing with anxiety, pay attention to the present moment, all the details that you can. Having nothing else to rely on. I did that for the ziplining trip, and it worked like a charm. I felt like a little kid. It was the most wonderful 2 hours I'd had in a long time. Not only was it a very enjoyable rec outing, but that started my spiritual path. Wow, I realized these guys know what they're talking about. There's something really there. This stuff works. But I also realized it's not enough to just read it and know about it. That would have done me no good that day. I actually had to put it into use. And once I put it into use, then the real knowing showed up. And it's like, okay. So then I was on fire. Now I'm like, all right, there's something here. Yes, I see it works. This stuff is real. How can I find out more? So I read everything I could get. I was reading more Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts. I was reading everything. And then within 9 months, I was just sitting at home one day and boom, the shift happened. The only thing that I can point to that day that was sort of out of the ordinary is I was doing some very deep inquiry into the nature of thought and identity. And I was simply doing a check, looking here, looking at my bodily organs and whether I'm identified with them or not. Am I identified with my heart? Well, it's got some love associated, so let's move on. Am I identified with my stomach? Not really. My kidneys? No. Liver? No. Why am I identified with my brain and its thoughts? Mm-hmm. So that space, that inquiry, it made me step back. And I'm not quite sure, other than that, what the catalyst was, but it opened up. And it's hard for me to describe in words what it was. There was an instantaneous knowing, which was odd because I'm used to getting my knowing from books or from a teacher, from somebody telling me. So for knowing to just arrive was really strange. And I knew it was true because all of a sudden, all those questions I had about life were explained. It's like, oh, well, of course. How did I not see this before? It's been right here in plain sight. And of course, there was evaporation of fear with the identity evaporating as well. And I was just overwhelmed. A lot of space. And it's like, wow, what now? What now? Now, there's a saying that most folks are familiar with, probably when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. When that happened. I instinctively knew a person in my life to talk to about this. And within 2 days, I was sitting in her living room chatting. I had no idea what her background was. I just knew intuitively to contact her. Turns out she has been a teacher for decades. She was initiated to teach by Guru Mai, the Swami Muktananda lineage. For years, she ran a retreat center in New Mexico. She knew exactly what had happened to me. And she took me under her wing, and we have had many wonderful conversations since then. She was a neighbor of mine. She lived a mile away. So over the last few years, many conversations, we've read many, many books. And I am so grateful, so lucky to have her as a friend and mentor to guide this. Now, as I look back, you asked me how the creativity fit into that. What I realized in the 9 months leading up to that is the way I was doing music had me focused every day on how I was feeling and trying to express that through music. So I would sit down every morning with a cup of coffee and a guitar in my hands and a tape recorder. And I had no preconceived ideas of what I was going to write. I just looked inside and said, what's this experience right now? What's this feeling right now? And how does that translate into this instrument in my hands? What are the sounds that match how I'm feeling? And it was just let me play something. I would play something, and then if it matched, great. If it didn't, I would modify it a little bit until it matched how I was feeling. There was an alignment of the music I was playing and how I was feeling. And I wrote every morning. I would sit down and simply write how I was feeling. So it was attention to the present moment, attention to how I was feeling, and not using words. I was not participating in the conceptual process at all. I was just all about the feel of this and how that translates into sound. That was it.
That's beautiful. I love. Oh man, I'm so moved by that. It's yeah, man. And anyone who's gonna watch this, who especially has that inclination, that musical inclination, or even visual art or whatever, like that point of connection between whatever the mystery of this is and the physical movement, the sound, the color, all of it. You can just close that gap and let it all be one movement. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to do, and that you're so attuned to it. You just knew to do that is really cool. Yeah, takes you right out of the conceptual mind.
Absolutely, yes.
Very nice. Yeah, cool. Do you have any like maybe a poem prepared or something you want to read maybe, or
Absolutely,
if you want? Okay.
Absolutely. This is a poem I read at the first retreat of yours that I attended last June. And actually, this particular poem I wrote on the day that I read it. We had taken a dinner break, and I was sitting on my back porch watching a flower bush and the lovely critters coming to visit it. And I jotted down these words. It's called Flower, subtitled Unconditional Love. I've been watching that flower and the hummingbirds and butterflies who come to visit every few minutes. And it has become immediately obvious to me why flowers bloom. It's unconditional love. They are simply being as beautiful as they can be in the only way they know how, turning no one away and giving what little they can. And though the flower asks nothing in return, I can see its reward for its offering of unconditional love. It gets to experience the beautiful things of this world up close. Hummingbirds, butterflies, and you. And it makes me wonder if all it takes is unconditional love, maybe I can bloom too.
Man, that's powerful. I love the contact, the closeness, that just visceral aliveness. So beautiful. So well displayed there.
Well, thank you. And what I was really talking about there, what I wanted to get to was human connection, the presence. And that's, of course, why I threw in you toward the end. And actually, most of my poetry has that. I realize that it's presence trying to communicate to presence. And it wasn't something that I planned. It's just something that I look back and I see, oh, that's a common characteristic of the poetry there. And I notice that's why. Because in most of those, I am talking about, well, in non-duality, I realize that whatever I'm experiencing, it's self. And so when I am talking to you, I'm talking to self. And actually, a lot of my work right now is, when I use the word you these days, I'm talking to myself. And that's what motivates most of my work. Not me egoically, let me explain that. What I mean by that is, what I write for is I write stuff that I want to listen to. And what I mean by that is, I live in a place where there's no winter. It's springtime year round. And my mountains all around. I can see the Pacific Ocean 30 miles away from my driveway. It's just beautiful. And to be out there walking around, I love to have inspiring things to listen to. That's what I create now. I'm in this experimental mode of combining poetry and music and mantra and binaural beats and guided meditation. I'm trying to throw all these things in the mix and see what it feels like as I'm walking around, observing nature, listening to all this stuff, listening to ohms with binaural beats behind them, or listening to my own voice talking to me, to get me out of my own head, my own thoughts. And so that's kind of what I write for. I write to myself, like me talking to me, but I also do it in a way that it could be interpreted by anybody else's. Presence to presence, whether it's my presence speaking reflectively through earphones at itself or to someone else. I try to remember that it's presence talking, speaking to presence.
Yeah. It comes through very powerfully that way. I feel exactly what you mean when you read the poetry and when you're communicating it. So when I was writing my book, one of the things that I would use to just sort of reorient myself on occasion was, what would I want to know when I was 17 and 18 years old and just suffering? How would I want to explain it to myself as clearly as possible? Now that's in words, but you can also do it through the language of sound, of course. In fact, it's a very, very direct way. Sound is powerful. Sound is really, really powerful. And finding ways to let the person or get the person to let their own guard down to sound, because often we have a lot of like push and pull with sound, right? We like this sound, we don't like that sound, but if it's done right and you get that person to just trust, to really let their guard down with the sound itself, the sound bath, the movement of sound, then they let their guard down with themselves actually. And that's how you want to connect to everything, connect to yourself. Yeah.
I love that. And when you mentioned talking to a teenager and trying to ascertain what they might want to hear, what might be helpful to them, I realized in not only in my teenage years, but through my adult years as well, one of the really important characteristics of this thing growing up and even to this day is rebellion. Oh my gosh. I was a rebel from, I guess, the time I came out of the womb. And it was actually supported by my parents. 2 years before first grade, I was supposed to start preschool. 1 year of preschool and then kindergarten. I went for a day or two and then told my mama, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't have enough time to play in the woods. And she let me stay home from school that year. I didn't have to go to preschool, so I could stay in the woods. And I look back on that and I think, wow, there was some rebellion against having to go to that institution every day and do that thing. It's like, no. Yeah. That was, it came out later. As a teenager, playing rock and roll was kind of how I got my start playing music. Rebellion. Again, supported by my parents. They let my rock bands play in the basement. But it was that rebellion, and that was supported by those around me. Almost a creative rebellion, became very powerful, especially when it was time to rebel against this.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. It's funny when you say rebel. In one sense, I was a rebel to the core. Like I didn't even know what I was rebellious against. I know now, but sometimes it felt like it was external. Sometimes it felt like it was internal, but there was definitely a rebellion and something that just was saying, this isn't right. Like the way I'm experiencing this world, the people and the self and all of it, it's just, there's something not right here. And part of me wanted to either fight it or change it or revolutionize something, or I didn't know what, but it was intense. And sometimes I tell people, I think I've made a video about this somewhere, but sometimes I tell people, trust your rebellion. Don't eradicate it. Just be mindful of how you direct it, because it can become destructive, of course, in ways that are unhelpful and violent, but it can also be deeply intelligent. It's the energy of the jester or the I love the song by Bob Dylan, All Along the Watchtower, the Joker and the Thief. They're the outsiders. They are the rebels of society, and they're archetypes, and one is an outsider by just completely going outside the rules altogether, and the other one's an outsider by going on the inside and then blowing it up and doing it again and again and again. And those are very important forms of rebellion, and if you attune to what it's about, what that rebellion's about, finding your own inner wound, like what is it about me that's so hurt and so, misunderstood, and then go deeper than that, to where you're really looking at identity and what that's about. Where did I become what I think I am? Where did I apparently become that? When did I start taking myself to be something, separate from all of this? And that kind of investigation does require a little bit of like piss and vinegar. Sometimes it requires a little bit of grit and a little bit of rebellion. And so there's a very intelligent aspect to rebellion is what I would say to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it played a big role in my life during my career. I told you I was in the tech career doing computer stuff, but I was playing in rock bands at night. I was teaching music lessons at night too, and playing in bands. And the kind of music I was playing, heavy rock and roll. And heavy rock and roll because of exactly what you're talking about. There's something in here that doesn't feel right. There's an angst of some kind. I'm not sure quite what to do with it. I'm not going to be destructive with it, but let me write some heavy, angry music about it. And I was really into those heavier genres of music for quite a while for most of my adult music career. But it was that rebellion and that feeling of unease, not being at ease, that was at the root of all that.
Yeah.
I even had a friend.
Go ahead.
I had a friend who didn't like heavy metal music, but he loved to go get in the mosh pits. Just. So there was something there that helped us get that out in a relatively healthy way.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think I was going to say this. When I was growing up, the music that appealed to me the most, especially when I started feeling that intense angst and so forth, was like punk rock, heavy metal, all that. I loved it. I still really enjoy it, actually. And it's interesting when I kind of look back or read some of those lyrics, and I could just resonate with the people writing it, that they were feeling that same kind of angst, and they knew how to turn that into music, and I resonated with it. And, maybe that stabilized me to some degree. Who knows? I think it was helpful. And I remember at one point, one of my friends and I were either listening to some music or discussing some kind of hardcore punk band or something. And I remember his sister, this was like in the 1980s, and his sister said, "Why do they have to yell so loud? And why is the music so loud and intense?" And I said, "What they're saying, you can't say softly." I remember that so clearly. I'm like, it makes so much sense to me. It's the angst behind it, and the anger and the frustration and the rebellion behind it. It's part of the music. It's part of what makes it, so dynamic. Yeah.
And you know what's interesting is because I spent so many years playing it, I'm pretty good at it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not in here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's in here, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I can put that music on and I can, yeah, I used to like this. I
Mm-hmm.
still kind of like it, but there's just not that alignment. There's just
Yeah.
not that internal resonance with it anymore. And
Yeah.
that's just one of the natural things that's happened after that initial shift of awakening is things have gotten so calm that there's still that sense of rebellion occasionally, but there's
Mm-hmm.
much more that sense of calm. And I
Mm-hmm.
prefer music that reflects that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that
Yeah.
that change over time. I can truly see how that creativity, that music, that outlet for me has been very beneficial. Just to have that, to express that, whatever that is, whether it's the heavy metal angst or the current serene peacefulness, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I still find I like pretty much all genres of music, and I'll occasionally listen to heavy metal. Sometimes I'm fascinated with some song will hit me. One was "Rainbow in the Dark" by Dio, Ronnie James Dio, and in there he says, "You're just an image caught in time." He the whole song is, so he's describing identity and the questioning of identity in a very, very clear way. It's really fascinating. But I do tend to now listen to there's a Spotify playlist called Sci-Chill, and it's Sybient. It's beautiful, like, ambient type stuff, and it's really fun. I listen to that quite a bit actually, and um, yeah, I love music, all kinds of music. Yeah.
I do too. And as a matter of fact, I keep it going essentially 24/7 here where I live. I get up first thing in the morning, I turn on the coffee pot, and I turn on the music. It's the last thing I turn off before I turn off the lights to go to bed. Now, let me clarify. When I say I'm playing music 24/7, I am not playing any specific genre or any specific old collections from the past. I'm not trying to, relive my past. I put on something that will be low key and going through the whole day, almost like a background noise, a background hum almost.
Mm-hmm.
I use music sort of like mantras. Sometimes I'll have a mantra on all day long. But it's having that same thing going all day long just provides, I don't know, for me, it's like a level of alignment with something that's consistently going all day long. I can align with it. It's almost like the stillness inside while there's movement around. And as a matter of fact, almost every song I write these days has this one component to it. And that one component is at least one note that goes consistently through the whole thing without changing. And I noticed that one day when I was meditating, listening to a piece of music, and I realized the stillness within me was really aligning with the stillness in the music, that single note. And even though there was movement in the music, there's movement here as well, the breath, the heartbeat, thoughts. But the stillness in the music and the movement in the music simultaneously resonated here. There was a recognition with the stillness and the movement here as well. So that was so powerful for me that is in almost everything that I write, almost everything.
I love what you just said.
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I was just going to say, I love what you said about how there is a stillness and there's also movement. That sounds paradoxical to the mind, but I find I'm a little careful with talking about stillness or silence too much because we can sort of try to force it in a way or try to impose it upon our experience or second guess our experience. But it's a different thing when you recognize simultaneously that there's an absolute stillness here, absolute stillness, and an absolute silence, and it doesn't exclude sound. It doesn't exclude movement. It's such a beautiful marriage of disintegrative and integrative energy. It's that's the attunement right there, and I mean you just said it very clearly.
one of the other things I wanted to mention, Angelo, is that when people tend to think about artists and their artwork, that's not exactly how I come into the world at all. I don't really think about the product. Obviously, with this identity structure evaporating, I don't think much about the artist either. What is important here is the process of creating. And I find that is going almost constantly. And that's one of the reasons I'm retired, just to let that flow. And for instance, last year, when I sit down to write a song, as I mentioned earlier, right before the awakening, I will sit down with an instrument, spend a couple of hours writing something, and just record it right there on the spot. Last year, I did the same thing and ended up with 16 albums worth of material in 1 year. 1 year. And it's just because there's just a flow, a constant flow. It also means that I would rather, once I write that song, I rarely ever play it again. I would rather sit down and write something new than to sit down and play something old, something that was yesterday. When I pick up an instrument and put it in my hands, I'm interested in what am I feeling right now, and how does that translate? I don't want to recreate yesterday. And because of that, I am constantly writing new and new and new material. That's what lights me up, the new stuff.
I love it.
Create.
I love it. The creative process as an ongoing engagement, just moving you deeper and deeper into presence, or deepening the attunement with presence, not requiring the mind to imagine where it's going or where it came from. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Right. And more often than not, especially with poetry, it doesn't really require any effort at all. And I'll give you an example. Last April, one morning, I woke up and walked into the room over there and looked out the window, and the very first thing I saw was a dewdrop out my window. And it was reflecting this light pretty brilliantly. You know, of course, I've just woken up, so anything's going to look pretty brilliant. But that really caught my attention. And immediately, there was an understanding of the metaphor of that particular dewdrop, of how that represents, how something like a human body can reflect something that's more universal. You know, the human body looks like a separate little thing going about its way in the world. How could it in any way reflect something larger than itself? Something, the unity of something larger. How could that even be? It's hard for the mind to wrap itself around that. But when I saw that dewdrop and the sunlight coming through it, it was immediately obvious. And so that essentially that poem, the understanding behind it just arrived. It came from elsewhere. It wasn't me. It wasn't this. It was noticing something. And from that noticing came an understanding. And so the poetry that resulted was simply this thing trying to use language to describe what it was that it had seen. So it was simply using words to describe experience. And that's how poetry, to me, that's what poetry is. That's all it is this thing describing its experience as it walks around. I like to call it poetry just because it doesn't rhyme very much. Occasionally it does. But I like to call it poetry just because people receive it differently. They don't expect it to make sense, at least initially. Mm-hmm. And they expect to ponder it a little bit. So that's why I call it poetry. This came again from that that observation out my window. This is called little dewdrop. Little dewdrop, reflecting the sunlight, so spectacular. It has me mesmerized, staring in amazement at its glistening beauty. I realize I could never stare at the sun for this long. I couldn't handle it. But this is just the right amount of dazzling light for me to absorb in this moment right now. I can give it my full attention without turning away. I am so grateful for this beautiful little thing, doing what it can to reflect the light that shines on it. And I do notice its beautiful contribution to my world. It inspires me to reflect the light as well. And I wonder, does it see me shining too? Little dewdrop reminds me of you. So spectacular. You have me mesmerized, staring in amazement at your shining beauty. I realize I could never stare at God for this long. I couldn't handle it. But this is just the right amount of dazzling divine light for me to absorb in this moment right now. I can give you my full attention without turning away. I'm so grateful for you doing what you can to reflect the light that shines on you. And I do notice your beautiful contribution to my world. You inspire me to reflect the light as well. And I wonder, do you see me shining too?
That's so powerful. Man. If we could just hold a little bit of that when we come in contact with everyone. You know? Yeah.
Once again, you notice there, Angelo, I pulled in the you.
Yeah.
And the two lines where I say, do you see me shining too? What I'm getting at there is a noticing of shared presence. That this shared presence, that's what I was trying to point to with this.
It's a very, very powerful mechanism with poetry. I mean, I'm reasonably familiar with a lot of different types of poetry and love it. But that mechanism you use where you transmit very clearly what that presence is in a very direct way with the words, but also the relatable experience everyone's had with being just dazzled by something in nature. Pull us into that. And you take it into the personal so well, and you break down all those barriers of all the veils we have between one another and the assumptions and the beliefs of who you are and who I am. You just really beautifully do that. Definitely. It's very obvious to me. And again, it just shows us that no matter how corrupted we think we are, how much pain we've carried and trauma we've had, there's still something in us that's so completely loving, for sure. It's in every single person. So if you can show somebody that one time, with a poem like that or anything, what a gift. Not only to show them that they're loved, but that they have the capacity to love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And not just, one of the things that I love is detecting this not only with people that I'm familiar with, loved ones, family, friends, but detecting this in strangers as well. And let me give you an example. Here's a poem I wrote called, it talks to exactly what you're talking about here. This is called Mistaken Identity, about running into a person and, well, she thought I was somebody else. And it was wonderful to not be me. That's what this is about. This is called Mistaken Identity. Out of the blue, you stopped to chat with me. I was walking along the lonely, deserted road when you drove up behind me. So when you stopped with your broad smile and your window down, it truly was as if your beautiful presence appeared out of nowhere. You talked as if you knew me, but you called me the wrong name. I wasn't sure who you were, although I had a vague idea based on that smile. The conversation was primarily about music. I guess you had seen me participating in music, or rather, music participating in me around this small town. Or were you talking to someone else in your mind? It doesn't matter what your body mind thought you were talking to, because it was this body mind that experienced the interaction. And in the end, this is what made my day. A random encounter with a beautiful smile, a delightful conversation, all because of a mistaken identity. Or was it? It was the experience of sheer delight and freedom to interact without truly knowing identities. I have never been more myself, who I really am, who we really are. You and I, non-duality, blooming, shining blindly, here now, without the baggage, the stories and paths of the past, the implied limitations and expectations of names and preconceived notions of a myriad of labels. For a few precious moments, you helped me escape me and made my day.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. You know, I can just I can just feel going through that. We've all been through things like that in the practical terms, as far as mistaken identity. But what it really struck me was, I don't know when it was for me, but it was years ago. This thought crossed my mind. It was like, I think I remember reading that Buddha, when he stood up from under the Bodhi tree after final enlightenment, liberation, whatever, and he said, "Wonder of wonder, all beings are by nature Buddha." Like, that surprised him. He said, "Wonder of wonders, all beings are by nature Buddha." And I remember thinking that and thinking, every time I meet somebody, can I see their Buddha nature? Like, can I see right through all of the collected personas, identities, beliefs about themselves and me, and habits of communication, and really see their Buddha nature shining through? And I actually realized I could. I could see it. I can, and I always can. And it's the strangest thing. It's like, almost like it's just back there. It's there, and it's looking right through. It's staring me right in the face. That unconditional love, the unbound, and with that, it just does something funny with identity. Like, even the conventional identities just drop, or shifted somehow, or and it's kind of a funny thing. But it's also that it's just that reminder after reminder after reminder that it's all interconnected ultimately. Yeah. So cool.
I love that. And to me, Angelo, it's not only funny, to me, that's the most beautiful thing that I experience when I open my door and walk out into the world. It's what you just described right there. Sure, here the mountains are beautiful, the butterflies and the flowers are beautiful, but that interaction right there is what I find the most sacred, beautiful, no matter who it is, especially those I know. But
yeah, so what comes to mind is, somebody watching this could look at this and say, so interacting with people is supposed to always feel good, be enjoyable, blissful, and peaceful. What about the struggle, the emotional pain, the shame, the guilt? Like, do you also have to work through that? How do you work through that? How have you worked through that? And how does that play into what we're talking about?
Wow. That's huge. That's huge. Certainly when I across somebody out there who's having a bad day, who's a little bit angry. Certainly, I steer clear of that, absolutely. But I also recognize I have days like that too, and I've been right there where they are. So there's, even though I will not engage that person, there's still much compassion for what they're going through in life. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think in one sense, without overthinking it, because I don't think about this too often, but I think I aspire to being able to connect in even those more and more difficult situations, but I don't push it or force it. It's a synergistic thing, and what I find is there's a deeper intelligence that comes with presence, where someone can be in a very difficult state, and maybe in the past I would have avoided it or just not known what to do, or maybe just held space or sit near that person but not necessarily interact, or just offer compassion silently. Sometimes now it's different. Like there may or may not be, but again, I can't put my finger on the scale. It has to happen organically. There may be an ability to just say the right thing, or to offer a few words of solace or connection, saying, hey, I've been in the darkest place. I've been in that darkest place. I've been in the deepest, darkest place more than once, and that I can share that place with you, even if there's no way we can talk about it, even if there's no, we don't have an ongoing dialogue, I still can share that with you. That's the place of human suffering. And so I honor that, actually. I honor that in everyone. And it's also one of the reasons I do what I do, because every human has the capacity to interact in the way we're describing. Every human has the capacity to be loved and to actually love without any desire to get something in return. And it's a very freeing and wonderful thing to be able to do. But habits often can prevent that and so forth. But I know that's possible for anyone as well, and I know it is. So I can't overlook the fact that there's this sort of mass of human suffering out there. And my way of working with that is various, but one really is just talking about awakening. Somehow it seems to occur sometimes, just like Eckhart Tolle's book has been such a transformative catalyst for so many people. But it happens through so many means, through music, through direct connection, through circling, through authentic relation. But it's really comes down to unconditional love. It really comes down to, can you unguard your own identity enough to really see, feel, and be with where that human is right now, no matter where they are,
Yikes. Yes. That's a tough one. And certainly, obviously, coming from a background of addiction, I got pretty low in life. At one point, I even attempted suicide. And I mentioned earlier in this interview that I had, at one point, a fear of heights. After some shadow work, I realized where that fear of heights came from. It's because when my first suicide attempt didn't work, and I woke up in the hospital, my second attempt was going to be to jump off a building. Wow. And so I had to decide real quick, when I get out of the hospital today, am I going to go finish the job, or am I going to decide to live? I need to make that decision right now, because I'm not going to live my life every day going to make this decision. So the day I'm going to make it, is it going to be the building, or am I going home? Well, obviously I chose going home. It took me years to realize that that's where my fear of heights came from. I couldn't trust myself. This thing couldn't trust itself when it got near a height, not to throw itself off. But once I was able to see that, of course, that shadow work is brilliant about, if we're diligent enough to not look away.
Yeah.
Eventually, that fear showed itself and cleared itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the depths that you're talking about in other human beings, I have touched those depths too. Most of us have. Mm-hmm. And that is where we can connect with one another in our humanness. Mm-hmm. We don't all have to be perfect. None of us are perfect. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to put that facade up here. Mm-hmm. We can show ourselves. Yes, I've been low too. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about it. Let's help one another. see the light. Let's, my favorite quote, we're talking about darkness and light. My favorite quote in this area is by Dr. Martin Luther King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
That's powerful. Yeah. I like what you said there. I might have just lost it. But this feels like a good segue into some of the work you do with music and working with people with addiction issues and how that, maybe a little bit about how it started, or not necessarily, but just how it's unfolded and what you do.
I lead at Serenity Vista International Addiction Treatment Center. I lead mindfulness of music sessions. I essentially go in there with a bunch of drums, hand drums, like djembes, things you can play with your hands, a bunch of them. And I use drums because you can't play a wrong note on a drum. So we go in there and we just play drums for a couple of hours. I'm also the drummer for the belly dance class in town. So that's a lot of fun. And so I know a lot of various beats from there. And so we just play. We play rhythms. For a couple of hours. And what's happening there is there's no way to do anything wrong. Can't play a wrong note. You don't have to know in advance what we're going to do. Just jump in and play along. And you can't be thinking about even 30 seconds ago, or you won't be able to play. You'll miss it. And you can't be thinking a few minutes ahead or a few seconds ahead. You'll miss it as well. You've got to be paying attention to the present moment to play the beats. And so it's just a way to play play like a kid, not play like Yo-Yo Ma, but play like a kid on the playground. Yeah. And just sitting around doing that is very powerful. Obviously you can get out some aggression. Obviously you can get in a groove and get up and move around as well. So it's simply a way to allow addicts who need present moment, because the addicts love to think about where that next fix is coming from, or what they did yesterday in the midst of their fix. But that present moment is a very powerful place for addicts to learn to be. And using music in that capacity is a way to truly show them a fun way to be there. Sometimes it's hard with meditation to sit there and watch that mind particularly if you're an addict and you've done some bad things or not very proud that you're sitting there in rehab. But so to have something for the mind to do while it's focusing on the present moment is what that is all about.
I love it.
And then I also do sound baths with them, which is the same sort of idea. But after they've done the active music meditation with drumming for a while, then I will have them lay back, put the drums down, and I'll pull out the crystal bowls, the Tibetan bowls, chimes, and things like that. And then we'll do, while they just relax into the present moment with the very soothing frequencies and sounds. They get then a more passive experience of the present moment with sound, but still a lot for their mind to pay attention to here and now.
Yeah.
So it's simply using music and sound to help them become familiar with the present moment and staying away from the past and the future, focusing on here and now.
Yeah. I find something interesting about people who have addiction, tendency towards addiction and addiction, serious addictions. I actually find they're really sensitive people. They're just very sensitive people. I think they've taken on often a ton of pain from others around them and so forth, but somehow they turn it inward. And I'm not sure they're always aware of that, but I think in maturing with your understanding of addiction, like, I think it becomes obvious to a lot of people, like, you're actually a very sensitive person. You're not a corrupted person. You're not a fundamentally flawed person. You're sensitive, actually. Yeah. And so helping someone learn to reattune to presence in whatever way that is, sound is a really, really good way. It's probably the most accessible in one sense, especially if you find a sound or some sounds or one note that that really works for you, that you can be right there with it, just that note. What a powerful thing! What a powerful gift to give someone who's sensitive, to learn that they can actually trust the environment, at least in certain aspects, in a way that they have a choice over, which could be music.
Right. Yeah. And what you pointed out there about addiction, I think is spot on. And the other thing I noticed about my own addiction is that, of course, this is looking back, not looking forward. But I noticed that was essentially this body-mind's way of escaping the suffering, of escaping the hell of its own identity and the suffering there. It was an inappropriate way of trying to accomplish what awakening did, of escaping that nightmare of stuff up there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think, it may be a broad brushstroke, but I would say, broadly speaking, most or all neuroses, much of depression, anxiety type disorders, addiction, like, really is about that. It's the cacophony of self-referential thoughts and the feeling around, the contracted feeling around that, and the sort of shame body around it. There's something just wrong with me. There's got to be something wrong with me,
Yeah.
And we can laugh now, but boy, when I remember it, and it felt so real. There was something wrong. Something's wrong. What is it? What's wrong? What's the problem here? It's like, and it just becomes like a dense body of contracted energy. But the truth of it is, it's based on a fundamental misperception. That's the beauty of it, really, essentially. And that shift is available to anyone but the strange thing is, sometimes you have to go in to go out. You have to really go so close to thought and see what's actually happening here. Where are these thoughts coming from? Like, who believes these thoughts? And if you get really close in the right way with this open-heartedness towards your own thought experience, it can really make a significant alteration in the whole system. Yeah. Man, covered a lot of good ground here.
Yes.
Yeah. So what might you say to anyone watching this who's musically inclined, who's or artistically inclined? What advice would you give a young artist, maybe, or someone like yourself as an artist younger in life?
I would say, follow your own instinct. Be yourself. Express yourself. If you need to copy somebody else to learn a technique, that's fine. Do that. But then make it your own. Do your own thing. Make it yours. I find that if I try to do something like that, and like if I sit down and say, well, I'm going to write a happy song because I just need to, or I'm going to, well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I have to be feeling happy before I can write a happy song. I can't decide I'm going to write that. I have to do what I feel. And if I try to do something that's not authentic, it's not going to work. So I would say to them, be authentic, be you.
I love it. Check in with yourself first and start there. Yeah. Let that be the expression. Yeah. And how about somebody who is struggling with addiction? What piece of advice you might give that person?
Get help. Get help.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody. Don't try to do it on your own. There's a way out. There is a way out.
Yeah. It's fascinating but sort of tragic that can be really the sticking point is something in there doesn't want to reach out for help, doesn't believe there is help. But we can't. None of us can do everything ourselves. Like we are interconnected for sure. And sometimes you're in a position that you do need help for sure, and that's okay. It's not shameful. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. It's perfectly okay, and you'll see yourself in a completely different way given some time. Yeah, and and there's help out there, and there's compassionate help out there.
Yes.
Yeah, and skillful help. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, Angelo.
Yeah, I feel it's just so connected in this conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing. Do you have another poem you want to share?
You don't have to. I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
And this would be a piece of advice that I would offer to someone interested in awakening. And I actually wrote this piece just this morning, actually for a dear friend, as encouragement to shed those things which keep us grounded. And this was intended to help her take flight. This is called Trusting Eggshells. Sometimes I notice a feeling inside of unease. Something isn't right. I feel contracted, constricted. Usually, when this happens, I can find immediate relief from the Chinese finger trap of my mind simply by letting go. But I've also learned if those constrictions keep coming back again, again, and again, well, not to look away, not to ignore it, or to distract myself from it. Rather, to face it, to start picking at it again and again and again. Why, you say? Isn't that the opposite of letting go? I will tell you why. Not because I have a head filled with knowledge and understanding about what's happening here, but because I have patience and trust in the processes of this amazing universe. How would a little bird ever learn it had wings and could fly if it never pecked away at the hard eggshell that encloses it? What feels like a constriction really isn't. It's a protective shell that serves a purpose during its growth and development until the time is right, until there's a readiness to take flight, finally fully embodying its true nature. Such inspiration when I see those birds soaring. They remind me not to give up, but instead to follow my intuition, to trust and to keep facing the constrictions, to keep pecking away until it finally breaks open. A little bird growing in the egg probably doesn't even know it has wings, probably doesn't know about the infinite sky in which it can fly. And I don't need to know what's on the other side of this protective shell of mine either. I trust it's more glorious than I could ever imagine. So I keep pecking away. And every time I look up and see a bird soaring overhead, I smile with gratitude and amazement. And I wonder what my true nature is once I break free of my constrictions.
Man. Love it. Absolutely love it. I love that the bird can't know the vast infinite sky that it's going to be flying in. It just knows to peck. Trust that instinct. You don't know what's on the other side. You can't know what's on the other side, but it's okay. It's worth the work and the effort. Perfect poem to end on. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I already know people are going to get a lot out of this. They're going to love it. And I'll direct them to your resources, and we can talk about some links, and I'll put them all into the video for anyone who wants to find your stuff. And hopefully we can thread in a couple of your acoustics into here somewhere as well. I think that'll be really cool.
Sure thing.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, thank you so much. And all I can say is thank you for all the work you're doing with everyone you come into contact with, which is the work of not doing work, which is the work of presence, obviously, and heart. You come with so much heart. It's just moving, and I really appreciate that.
Wow. Well, Angela, I will say the same thing about you. The work you are doing moves me to tears. Thank you for all you are doing for humanity. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.
Attachment and expectations are my anchor, keeping me from adventure upon the high seas of life. It's time to cast those things away and set sail. What if I didn't know your name, and you didn't know mine, and we met without stories? What if we cast those things away and set sail upon the high seas of life? Are you ready to leave it all behind and sail around the world with me? Right now, let's go. What adventures await upon the high seas of life? Let's not wait another minute. Let's find out. What if I didn't know your name and you didn't know mine, and we met without stories? What if we cast those things away and set sail upon the high seas of life?